Well, hello, this is Jeff Gaudiosi, and you're on misplacedstraws.com where music comes to life. And my guest today is really one of the leading figures in the modern progressive rock scene. You may know him best from his work with bands like It Bites and Frost, and one of my favorites, Arena. But he's back now with a new record in the evolution of his solo project, Lonely Robot. The record is called A Model Life. It's out everywhere on August 26th. Please welcome John Mitchell. Welcome, John.
Thank you, Jeff. That was quite the introduction.
Got to sum it all up in there. In that introduction, I mentioned the evolution of Lonely Robot, and the first few records had very much of a kind of a sci-fi lean to the lyrics. The last record, Feelings Are Good, as you said at the time, kind of brought the lyrics back to earth a bit. And this record kind of continues that more personal style of writing. Is it just kind of a natural progression of you as a writer, or kind of a conscious, okay, I did that style, now I'm going to try something different?
Yeah, I mean, I think those first three albums were only ever going to be, well, they were always, the plan was to always have them interlinked well, a trilogy, as it
Mhm.
were. And I always knew that, I kind of, you get to the last song on Under Stars, divisively called an ending. And that's because I felt like I couldn't really take that sort of whole thing much further. I like the imagery of it and the funny little tin robot and the whole funny animated thing that made to go along with the third record. And I'm proud. I'm very proud of a lot of the songs on those first three albums. And I am genuinely. I thought they were. I thought there's some stuff on there I'm really really very fond of. But yeah, I just didn't think I could. I didn't feel like I could it's obviously the lyrics on those albums are quite
Mhm.
otherworldly and
Yeah.
whimsical. I just didn't think I could take any further, really. And I just wanted to start writing from a more personal perspective and try and exercising some of the demons through the wonderful world of music, as it were.
And this is a very emotional record, recalibrating, species in transition, duty of care. They're all pretty deep lyrically. And I think the state of the world over the past couple of years has sort of made all of us kind of look inward and face things that may have been buried or not thought about. Is this a record that you would have or could have written pre-pandemic, or is this kind of a result of sort of that period of introspection?
No, I'd absolutely no way I would have made this album. A couple of years ago, there's not a chance. I mean, so many things. Obviously, I think the whole pandemic thing, um, it just, yeah, I mean, it changed everybody. I don't necessarily know for the better. Um, I mean, I honestly think that it kind of made me realize what a house of cards my life has sort of become. And being the nature of the person that I am and coming from, I had a very strange upbringing in some ways. Um, uh, I remember, I don't ever remember a time that I didn't realize I was adopted. And obviously, when I was a kid, that there was a bit of not a stigma attached to it, in that people, you know, didn't. They just thought it was very odd. They thought like it was a strange subject that you shouldn't talk about if you knew that someone was adopted, which is absolutely nonsense. You can talk about, I've never not known that to be the case. But with being, there is a certain amount of baggage that comes with being adopted, and some people try and go and look for their biological parents because they think that's going to be some sort of a band-aid over their childhood, and I never have. I came close to it at one point, but out of respect for my mother, who to this day is probably the single greatest woman that ever walked the earth, in my opinion, and the patience of a saint. I just, out of respect for her, I didn't think I didn't want to open another Pandora's box. And my ex-partner always used to say, well, you should look at these programs like Long Lost Family, where it's like a Kodak moment between all these people who get reconnected with their adoptive parents or whatever, or their biological parents. I'm like, yeah, that's the Disney version of events. But of course, if you were to look at the other flip side of the coin where it doesn't always go to plan, and
Mhm.
you might end up with more feelings of rejection or whatever.
Mhm.
So I just thought, no, I've got enough dealing going on with, with what I do know, the information I do have, and my experience of life thus far. So I didn't think that ever, At the same time, it kind of does make me realize that through the pandemic and ending a long-term relationship, did make me realize that maybe I've held on to a lot of other things that weren't good for me as well. And in a many ways, writing this album helped me realize I need to let go of them. A lot of very bad learned behaviors and baggage. And I think in a way, I think the notion is that if you're if you have these issues of, I mean, even going back as far as Kino, I mean,
Mhm.
singing songs about that I find it very difficult to let go of relationships and things and belongings, and I'm a bit of a hoarder, as you can probably see. And you compartmentalize things and you objectify emotions, and it's just, well, that's the nature of my
Mhm.
existence, and I've come to realize it's not very healthy. um, to sometimes you have to cut certain people out of your life who are just, you think you feel a duty of care towards
Mhm.
them, and really you don't. So that's one thing I did learn from all of this and writing this album, is that if one thing so fundamentally large in your life can change, maybe some other smaller things need to change as well.
Mhm. And along with the personal depth in the lyrics of this record, I think musically there's an evolution as well. This, at least to my ears, feels like the most melodic, almost the most accessible record that you've done is Lonely Robot to date. Almost a more organic feel to the music that really suits the lyrics. Did they kind of go hand in hand when you were putting it all together?
Well, like, yeah, I mean, I kind of realized there's some basic things that I realized probably the music on the first three albums in places is quite a lot heavier
Mhm.
than maybe this album is. This album's a bit more like Metallica versus yacht rock or something. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I kind of just, I've just felt like um, the thing is, a lot of those. I mean, I'm very fond of those first three
Mhm.
records, and but with this album, I got the old Telecaster out, and I was a bit more
Mhm.
jingle jangle than chuggy chuggy, and there's a lot more CP70. I
Mhm.
play a lot of that on on this album. I don't write on guitars, so it's very
Mhm.
difficult for me. Whenever I put guitars down, it's always like, okay, so how am I going to counter these keyboard parts or whatever? So it's always like, um, yeah. I mean, the big, like there are, like on the first album, there's a song called God versus Man, where it's a big rocking riff, and I'm kind of, there's the odd thing like that, but I'm more into, on this album's more about sort of like broken chords and arpeggiated cleaner parts, and
Mhm.
more sort of, more of that, and way more guitar solos than I have any right to be playing. I thought we banned them.
But when you put it all together, it makes a sound that's very urgent and almost begs to be played live. I mean, have you put any thought to whether or not you're going to take this on the road? Because I think hearing these songs in a live setting would just be just a very emotional experience.
Yeah, I mean, certainly I can hear some of these songs I think Species in Transition will sound pretty
Mhm.
massive live. Yeah, I think there is, there are some tour dates in place in February,
Mhm.
but whether or not they come to pass, we've moved them twice already, and it's just been not practical to do it because of the current visa situation, because of the whole Brexit
Mhm.
shenanigan, which of course um, I was quite disappointed about. I'll be honest with you. I
Mhm.
think that's the trouble when you live on an island, is everybody has island mentality. It's not the first time we've written about it, and I was
Yeah.
quite disappointed that and of course there's a whole world of people that live in England that are a certain age that remember some quasi imagined version of England, some leafy pastoral version of England where it existed as its own entity outside of
Mhm.
the domineering control of Jean-Claude Juncker in Brussels or whatever. It's
Mhm.
nonsense. The reason the European Union exists is purely to stop us ever going to war with Germany
Mhm.
again. And whoever voted that we should leave the European Union is some backwards thinking idiot, as far as I'm concerned. And I'm
Mhm.
quite happy to say that on your podcast.
Yeah.
I'm sick and tired of I'm sick and tired of you know everything as a musician revolves around traveling the world and going into Europe border free, and I'm thinking I can't do well. You could say, well, John, that's very selfish of you. You're only thinking about it from a musical perspective. But sorry, yes, I am, and I'm not of an age where how's it going to affect Granny Smith, aged 83, who probably thinks, I remember when. Anyway,
Mhm.
I'm a bit annoyed about all of that, and to be honest with you, it's made it very impossible for people to go and tour in Europe without considerable expense and considerable effort. So we'll see.
Yeah, yeah, and it's not just, and I've had a similar conversation with other musicians. It's not just a selfish thing on your end because it affects all of us. It affects all of your fans, people around the world that want to experience what it is you do can't anymore. And so
Yeah, I
it
mean, it's obviously playing in America. You've always had the you've always had to get the
Mhm.
to get the thing with the visa sorted. But isn't that the reason that cruise to the edge happens? Is because
Yeah.
you're in foreign waters. You're in a visa free. You're floating. It's very clever.
Yeah.
Playing a gig in piratical seas. Um, yeah, it is annoying. It's frustrating. And of course, the thing about musicians and the thing that all of this has brought to light is that really, I always make a joke about it, saying, well, music, I suppose it's a luxury, and of course, the way people have, in my opinion, devalued music. Not. I'm not here to slam Spotify, but it's
Mm.
just the way that people consume music now, in such a flip, move, next song, 30 seconds, don't like that, this, the other, and the whole notion of quick return or whatever, and I don't know, there's almost, well, I don't think of there's no polite word to describe it, but there's a spasmodic nature of TikTok and all these
Mhm.
things that are it's like this,
Mhm.
mustardy, horrible. I used to love sitting in a room and listening to Pink Floyd with headphones on.
Yeah.
Why can't we go back to that? What's so wrong with that? You know,
I'd
oh,
like
but we've
to.
got vinyl back. Yeah, but do we? Because about 45% of vinyl just sits on people's walls looking cool. You know, I don't know. You tell
Yeah.
me.
Well, personally, I'm from a generation where I'm with you. I'm gonna sit in my room with the headphones on and the record playing and listen to it end to end. I don't get the
Yeah,
picking a track here and there thing either. So
headphones on. It's the
yeah.
wall. And what are you? And your mum goes, "What are you listening to?" You wouldn't understand, mum. It's all so deep.
Yeah, and earlier on in the introduction, I mentioned a lot of the other bands you've been involved with over your career. And this is a question I've asked to a lot of people. I've gotten some pretty surprising answers. Do you enjoy the freedom of being able to have multiple creative outlets for your art? Or would you prefer to have just kind of that one stable band to direct everything to, like it used to be back in the 80s and 90s?
Well, I mean, obviously, progressive rock, or the paddling pool of progressive rock, as I lovingly call it, is rife with people playing on. I
Mhm.
mean, I don't want to swing the pendulum of blame, but I obviously do far too many things.
Mm.
Mike Portnoy also does far too many things. Lots of people do far too many things. We should all just calm down and focus, right? Um, but it's what you do.
Yeah.
It's there's not as much income floating around from one. Hate to use the word revenue stream, so
Mhm.
you do have to prop yourself up with various different things. That being said, you have to look at it from Lonely Robot. To me, is my creative outlet. Arena, it's not really my band as
Mhm.
such. Let's be perfectly honest about that. It was set up by Mick
Mhm.
Pointer and Clive
Oh,
Nolan, and it's their baby, and the buck stops with them. And same with Frost. That's Jem's band. Although I have very much enjoyed all the time I've spent writing with Jem and co-writing with
mhm.
him. He has the final say in those things. So yeah, this Lonely Robot is my jam, man.
Mhm.
And that's what I do. And I enjoy that because you know what, I've been in bands all my life. I'm sick of being in bands. It's like, stop it with the bands. Because bands are always like, bands are like two things, right? Bands, they're just this kind of absolute nonsense version of reality where people think that bands should be like some absolute sort of democracy. But of course, there's already somebody in a band that drags their heels, isn't there? There's always some slacker at the back who's you're carrying. And then there's and then there's got to be a captain of the ship. There's got to be somebody. If you even like you take, for example, It Bites, the band that I have played in the past. I would argue they would never have got anywhere were it not for Francis Dunnery, because he was definitely the one that kicked them up the arse and said, right, this is what we're going to do. He was the captain of the ship. And whatever their chemistry and dysfunctional relationship they all had with each other, it seemed to work for a very short period of time and probably got things done. I mean, I think with that band, perhaps they changed musical direction too often. I mean, I change my socks once a day. Perhaps don't change me. You went from like the first album, which is like Duran Duran, into Genesis, into some hard rocking band, and people didn't know where they were coming or going. Anyway, I'm rambling. Bands. Yeah, I hear the Marillion all sit in a room and jam, and they jam with each other, and then they record, and then somebody glues it all together. I'm going, that is the most strange thing. I cannot imagine. I cannot imagine doing that. But what works for them?
Yeah. And you mentioned Arena. That's a band that's constantly evolving, and new records coming out in October, The Theory of Molecular Inheritance, with a new singer, Damian Wilson. I mean, what can you tell us about your thoughts on how putting that record together went, and the upcoming tour?
Well, again, with Arena, the buck always stops with Clive Nolan because it's his baby. He writes music very, very differently to me. I mean, he kind of, when I kind of, it's like I always think of Arena as what I call Japanese house, right? So you start with the roof and build downwards. It always seems to be like in a very back to front way of doing things. He kind of writes the lyrics and the vocal melody last, whereas that's the first thing that I do. So, and Arena has always been like we have a way of doing things. Everybody, plays riffs on this new album that we've got. I remember sitting in a room with Mick and he'd play me things by various bands and goes, I really like that riff. Can you write something almost identical to that riff, but not that riff? Like, isn't that some sort of theft? But okay. So I would write things and and we'd submit these riffs to Clive. They go in the big hat of riffage, and then Clive says, well, I like this bit, I like that bit, and my riffs, or however I originally intended my riffs to sound, get surrounded by different chords and different, and so I suppose it's a collaborative point in one way, shape, or form. But obviously, in my megalomaniacal fashion, I quite like the idea of me sitting in a room by myself, going, I shall have it my way, and do it myself. Obviously, that's just born out of the fact that I've been in bands all my life, and it is a compromise. And you get to a certain age and you can't be bothered to compromise anymore, I suppose. That's how Lonely Robot came to be.
I was going to say, which brings us full circle
back
to
that's exactly it. Which is how Thomas Faber said, do you want to do another It Bites album? I said, no, not really. Do you want to do another Kino album? No, not really. And he said, well, maybe we should do something new, because he sounds exactly like Arnold Schwarzenegger. No, he doesn't. He doesn't. I've got a very good relationship with Thomas at the label, but every time I try and impersonate him, it does end up sounding like Arnold Schwarzenegger. So I mean, no offense by that. I just can't do the accent.
Yeah. Well, we've been spending some time here with John Mitchell. Lonely Robot, the new record is called A Model Life. It's out August 26th. It's a great record. Honestly, it's up there right now as one of my favorites of the year so far. And John, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I really
just a quick one. If the world were to explode right now and then the rest of the year, would this be your favorite record?
It'd be up there. It'd be top 5.
Top 5. Okay, I'll take that.
Yep.
I'll take that for cash.
And that's only on, a handful of listens. Let me have a couple of months sitting with it. So by the end of
Okay,
the year,
okay. Let's hope we get to the end of the year.
exactly.
Let's hope nobody nukes us.
Yeah. But at the worst, right now you're top five. So,
Oh, good. Okay, I'll take that. Yeah.
Thanks so much. Best of luck with this. Hopefully, one of these days we could either catch you in America or on international waters.
Or international waters. Who knows? Maybe on some sort of progressive rock ferry.
There you go.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot, John.
Thank you very much
Yeah,
indeed, Jeff.
bye.
Bye bye.